My father died when I was 10 and my mother had to go to work. I wanted to help out, so I got a part-time job as a caddy. I began to understand the more important aspects of caddying when I was in high school. My clients were the presidents and CEOs of major corporations including Gillette, Polaroid, and more to the point, Fidelity. In helping D. George Sullivan find his ball, I was helping myself to find a career. The golf course was the next best thing to being on the floor of a major exchange. After my clients sliced the drive, they would enthusiastically describe their latest investment. The happy stories I heard on the fairways made me rethink the family position that the stock market was a place to lose money. Many of my clients seemed to be making money in the stock market. I continued to caddy throughout high school and into college. I was on the liberal arts side of Boston College, avoiding all the required math and accounting courses, the normal preparations for business. Instead, I studied metaphysics, logic, and philosophy, along with history, psychology, and political science. Investing in stocks is an art, not a science. People trained to rigidly quantify everything are at a disadvantage. If stock picking could be quantified, you could rent time on the nearest Cray computer and make a fortune. But it doesn't work that way. I applied for a summer job at Fidelity during my senior year. This was at Mr. Sullivan's suggestion, Fidelity's president for whom I had caddied. I was thrilled to be hired at Fidelity. Some interns like me were put to work researching companies and writing reports just like the regular analysts. The whole business was suddenly demystified. Even a liberal arts major can analyze a stock. I went to Wharton after that interlude at Fidelity more skeptical than ever about the value of academic stock market theory. It seemed to me that most of what I was learning at Wharton could only help you fail in the investment business. I studied statistics, advanced calculus, and quantitative analysis. Quantitative analysis taught me that the things I saw happening at Fidelity couldn't really be happening. It was also obvious that the Wharton professors who believe in academic theories weren't doing nearly as well as my new colleagues at Fidelity. So I cast my lot with the practitioners, and my distrust of theorizers continues to this day. After serving my ROTC-required 2-year hitch in the Army, I rejoined Fidelity as a research analyst in 1969. I was promoted to Director of Research in 1974, and in May 1977, I took over the Fidelity Magellan Fund. Fidelity Magellan had $20 million in assets and 40 stocks in the portfolio. My boss suggested I reduce the number to 25. I listened politely and raised the number to 60. 6 months later to 100. Soon after that to 150 stocks. I didn't do it to be contrary. I did it because I couldn't resist buying a bargain. There were bargains everywhere in those days. My portfolio continued to grow. Instead of settling for a couple of savings and loans, I bought them across the board after determining each was a promising investment. It wasn't enough for me to invest in one convenience store. I just had to buy Circle K, National Convenience, Shop and Go, and Hoppin' Foods, to mention a few. Pretty soon I became known as the Will Rogers of equities, a man who never saw a stock he didn't like. Since I own 1,400 now, I guess they have a point. Actually, Will Rogers may have offered the best bit of advice about stocks. He said, "Don't gamble. Take all your savings and buy some good stock, and hold it till it goes up. Then sell it. If it don't go up, don't buy it." I turned off my Quotron at the Fidelity Magellan Fund on May 31st, 1990. This was exactly 13 years from the day I began running the fund. I figured I had purchased more than 15,000 stocks for investors in Magellan, and many of them more than once. No wonder I had gotten a reputation for never having met a share I didn't like. My departure was sudden, but it wasn't something I had dreamt up overnight. The task of keeping track of so many companies had begun to take its toll. As much as I enjoyed managing a portfolio the size of the GNP of Ecuador, I missed not being home to watch the children grow up. When you start to confuse Freddie Mac, Sallie Mae, and Fannie Mae with members of your family, and you remember 2,000 stock symbols, but forget the children's birthdays, there's a good chance you've become too wrapped up in your work. By mid-1990, it finally dawned on me that the job had to go. I remembered that my fund's namesake, Ferdinand Magellan, also retired early to a remote island in the Pacific. Although what happened to him afterwards, he was torn to shreds by angry natives, was enough to give me pause. Hoping to avoid a similar fate at the hands of angry shareholders, I met with Ned Johnson, my boss at Fidelity, along with Gary Burkhead, the Director of Operations, to discuss a smooth exit. Our powwow was straightforward and amicable. Ned Johnson suggested that I stay on as group leader for all the Fidelity equity funds. He offered to give me a smaller fund to operate, one, say, with $100 million in assets, as opposed to the $12 billion with which I had to cope. But even with a couple of the digits knocked off, it seemed to me the new fund would require the same amount of work as the old one, and I'd be back spending Saturdays at the office. I declined Ned's gracious invitation. I've always been skeptical of millionaires who congratulate themselves for walking away from a chance to enrich themselves further. Turning one's back on a fat future paycheck is a luxury that few people can afford. But if you're lucky enough to have been rewarded in life to the degree that I have, there comes a point at which you have to decide whether to become a slave to your net worth by devoting the rest of your life to increasing it, or whether to let what you've accumulated begin to serve you. I've chosen the latter, but with an important qualification. I'm still a stock picker, even though I've rejoined the amateur ranks.